standing in his apartment when I found the photos. Not just any photos, printed ones. The kind people don't make anymore unless something matters. They were tucked inside a book on his shelf, the one I'd seen him stare at sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. My hands were shaking as I flipped through them. Her, over and over again. Her laughing. Her kissing his cheek. Her wearing the same necklace that was now sitting in a box addressed to me on his kitchen counter. I felt my stomach drop so hard I thought I might actually throw up right there on his carpet. That's when I heard his key in the door. I had maybe 5 seconds to decide confront him or pretend I never saw any of it. But my body was frozen. The door opened and he walked in with that soft smile he always gave me, the one that made me feel like I was the only person in the world. Except now I knew the truth. I wasn't the only person. I wasn't even the first. I was just the replacement. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you're sitting down. Because this gets so much worse than I ever could have imagined. Let me go back to the beginning, because that's the only way this makes sense. I met Daniel at a gallery opening in March. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My friend, Emma, dragged me along because she didn't want to go alone. And I was in one of those phases where I said yes to everything just to feel like I had a life. He was standing in front of this massive abstract painting, hands in his pockets, looking at it like it held the answers to something important. I remember thinking, he looked sad in a way that made me want to know why. Emma noticed me staring and elbowed me hard in the ribs. "Go talk to him," she whispered. But I shook my head because I don't just walk up to strangers, especially not men who look like they're processing something heavy. But then he turned around and our eyes met, and he smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, almost shy one that made my chest feel warm. He walked over to me and said, "Do you think it's supposed to be a sunset or a fire?" I looked at the painting and said, "Maybe both. Maybe it's about how sometimes they're the same thing." He stared at me for a second, and I thought I'd said something stupid. But then he nodded slowly and said, "I like that. I'm Daniel." We talked for 2 hours that night. He told me he worked in architecture, that he'd moved to the city 3 years ago for a fresh start. I didn't ask what he needed a fresh start from. It felt too personal, too soon. He asked about me, really asked, like he cared about the answers. When I told him I was a teacher, his whole face lit up and he said, "That's incredible. You're shaping actual human beings." No one had ever made my job sound that important before. By the end of the night, he asked for my number, and I gave it to him without hesitating. Emma said later that she'd never seen me look at someone the way I looked at him. Our first date was at this tiny Italian restaurant where the tables were so close together we could hear everyone else's conversations. He told me about growing up in a small town, how he'd always felt like he didn't fit. I told him about my parents' divorce when I was 12, how it made me scared of commitment for years. He reached across the table and took my hand and said, "I get that. I've been scared too." There was something in his voice, something breakable, and I felt this pull toward him that I'd never felt with anyone else. When he walked me home that night, he kissed me on my doorstep, soft and careful, like I was something precious. The next few months were a dream. He texted me every morning with a song recommendation. He remembered small things I mentioned in passing, that I loved sunflowers, that I hated cilantro, that I always got anxious before parent-teacher conferences. He'd show up at my apartment with takeout and terrible reality TV queued up because he knew I needed to decompress. My friends loved him. My mom loved him. I was falling so hard and so fast that it scared me. But every time I tried to pull back, he'd do something that made me feel safe. He told me I was his second chance at getting things right. I asked him what he meant, and he said he'd been in a serious relationship before that ended badly, and he'd spent years thinking he'd never feel this way about anyone again. I should have asked more questions. I should have pushed for details. But I didn't because I was too busy being happy, and happiness is a kind of blindness. He never talked about her, his ex, except in the vaguest terms. It wasn't right, he'd say. We wanted different things. I assumed it was painful for him, so I didn't pry. I thought I was being respectful. I thought I was being understanding. What I didn't know was that I was walking straight into a trap he'd been setting since the night we met. The cracks started small. In July, we were at his place, and his phone buzzed with a text. He grabbed it fast, too fast, and I saw a flash of a woman's name before he turned the screen away. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He hesitated for just a second before saying, "Old friend. No one important." I wanted to believe him, so I did. A few weeks later, we ran into someone at a coffee shop, a guy who clearly knew Daniel. He looked at me, then at Daniel, and there was this weird tension before he said, "Wow, she looks just like..." And Daniel cut him off. "We have to go," he said, practically dragging me out of there. I asked him what that was about, and he said the guy was confused, that he didn't know what he was talking about. But the thing is, once you start noticing the cracks, you can't stop. I started paying attention to the way he'd change the subject whenever I asked about his past. The way certain songs would come on, and he'd get this look on his face like he was somewhere else. The way he'd sometimes call me by a name that wasn't mine just for a split second, and then correct himself so fast I almost thought I imagined it. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that everyone has a past, and I couldn't punish him for his. And came the night I found the photos. He'd asked me to grab a book from his shelf, something about sustainable architecture he wanted to lend me. When I pulled it out, a stack of pictures slipped onto the floor. I bent down to pick them up, and that's when I saw her. She had dark hair like mine, the same length, the same wave. She had my build, my style, even the way she smiled in the photos looked like the way I smiled. In one picture, she was wearing a necklace with a tiny silver bird pendant. My heart stopped because I'd seen that necklace before. Daniel had given me one just like it for my birthday last month. He said he'd had it custom made. I stood there holding those photos, and everything clicked into place. The comments from his friends, the way he'd seemed so sure about me so fast, the feeling I'd had sometimes, like he was looking at me but seeing someone else. I wasn't his second chance. I was his do-over. I was the girl he'd lost, rebuilt in his image. And the worst part, the part that made me feel like the floor was crumbling beneath me, was that I had no idea how far he'd go to make this fantasy real. That's when I heard his key in the door. The door swung open, and Daniel walked in carrying grocery bags. That easy smile on his face like this was just another normal evening. "Hey, babe," he said, kicking the door shut behind him. "I got stuff for dinner." Thought we could make that pasta you like." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me standing there with the photos in my hands. His smile faltered. For a moment, we just stared at each other, and I watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding to something I couldn't quite read. "What are you doing with those?" he asked quietly. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Who is she, Daniel?" He set the grocery bags down slowly, like he was buying himself time to think. That's my ex, Sarah. I told you about her." I held up the photo of her wearing the necklace. "You told me you had this made for me." "Custom made," you said. His jaw tightened. "I can explain," I laughed, but it sounded wrong, almost hysterical. "Please do, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to turn me into her." He took a step toward me, and I took a step back. Something flickered in his eyes, hurt, maybe, or anger. "It's not like that," he said. "Yes, okay, you remind me of her. Is that a crime? Is it wrong that I was attracted to you because you have similar qualities to someone I loved?" The way he said loved, present tense, made my stomach turn. Similar qualities. I held up another photo. "Daniel, we could be sisters. And this necklace isn't the only thing, is it? The restaurant you took me to on our first date, you took her there too, didn't you? The songs you send me every morning, were those her songs?" He ran his hand through his hair, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked cornered. "What do you want me to say?" "Yes, I see similarities. Yes, maybe subconsciously I was drawn to you because of that. But what we have is real, don't you feel that?" I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "What we have is a lie. I'm not her, Daniel. I'm not your second chance to get it right with Sarah. I'm a completely different person, and you've been pretending I'm not." He moved closer, and this time I didn't back away. "You don't understand," he said, and his voice cracked. "She destroyed me. We were supposed to get married. I had the ring. I had the whole thing planned, and she left me for someone else. Just walked away like our 3 years together meant nothing. I spent 2 years trying to get over her, and then I met you. And for the first time, I felt like I could breathe again. Maybe you're right. Maybe I saw her in you at first. But I fell in love with you, not her memory. I wanted to believe him so badly it physically hurt. But I couldn't ignore what I'd seen, what I'd felt for months now. If you fell in love with me, then why do you still have her photos? Why did you give me her necklace? Why do you sometimes say her name when you're half asleep?" His face went pale. "I've never." "Yes, you have. 3 times now. You think I didn't notice?" I set the photos down on his coffee table. "I need to go." He grabbed my wrist, not hard, but firm enough to stop me. "Please don't leave. Stay and let's talk about this." I looked down at his hand on my wrist, and something inside me went cold. "Let go of me, Daniel." He did immediately, but the damage was done. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard him say, "She broke me. I thought you'd be different. I thought you'd understand." I turned back to look at him one last time. "I do understand. I understand that you never wanted me at all. You wanted a second chance at her. Well, I'm not her, and I never will be." I left his apartment and made it halfway down the block before I started crying. I called Emma, and she came to get me, didn't ask any questions, just drove me home and sat with me while I ugly cried into her shoulder. "He used me," I kept saying. "I was just a stand-in for someone else." Emma held me tighter. "He's an idiot who doesn't deserve you." But that didn't make it hurt less. I'd let him in. I'd trusted him. I'd started imagining a future with him. And the whole time, He'd been projecting someone else onto me. I didn't hear from Daniel for 3 days. No texts, no calls, nothing. Part of me was relieved. Part of me kept checking my phone, hoping he'd reach out, which made me angry at myself. On the 4th day, flowers arrived at my apartment, sunflowers, my favorite. The card said, "I'm sorry, I need to see you. Please." I threw them in the trash. An hour later, my phone rang. It was him. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Thank you for picking up," he said, and he sounded exhausted. "I've been going crazy. I need to explain everything face to face. There's so much you don't know." I sat down on my couch, phone pressed to my ear. What could you possibly tell me that would change anything? He was quiet for a moment. The truth about Sarah, about why she really left, about what I did. Something in his tone made my skin prickle. "What did you do, Daniel?" "Not over the phone," he said. "Meet me tomorrow. The park near your place, noon. If you still want nothing to do with me after you hear the whole story, I'll leave you alone forever. I promise." Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to say no, to block his number and move on. But there was something in his voice, something desperate and dark, that made me need to know. "Fine," I said, "tomorrow at noon. But this is the last time." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the look on his face when I'd found the photos, the way he'd said what I did, like he was confessing to something terrible. I tried to tell myself that I was being dramatic, that whatever he had to say wouldn't be that bad. But deep down, I knew better. Deep down, I knew that the Daniel I'd fallen in love with had never really existed. He was a performance, a carefully constructed character designed to make me feel special, while he worked through his own demons. The next morning, I almost didn't go. I stood in front of my mirror, wondering what the hell I was doing meeting up with a man who'd essentially been using me as a replacement for his ex. But I needed closure. I needed to hear whatever truth he'd been hiding, even if it hurt. So I put on my jacket, grabbed my keys, and headed to the park. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on our bench, the one we'd sat on dozens of times before. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled shirt, like he hadn't slept either. When he saw me, he stood up, and I could see his hands were shaking. "You came," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." I stayed standing, keeping distance between us. "You said you'd tell me the truth, so tell me." Daniel took a deep breath, and when he started talking, his voice was low and strained. "Sarah didn't just leave me for someone else. She left me because I became obsessed. After we got engaged, I started getting paranoid that she'd change her mind, that she'd realize she could do better. I tracked her phone. I showed up at her work unannounced. I went through her messages. I convinced myself I was protecting what we had, but really I was suffocating her. When she found out, she was horrified. She said I'd turned into someone she didn't recognize. She left and got a restraining order. I felt my blood run cold. "A restraining order," he nodded, not meeting my eyes. "It was dropped eventually, after I did therapy and proved I wasn't a threat. But yeah, I scared her that badly. And the worst part is, I told myself it was her fault, that if she'd just been honest with me, if she'd just let me in more, I wouldn't have felt like I needed to keep tabs on her. It took me a long time to admit that I was the problem. I should have walked away right then. Every cell in my body was telling me to run, but I needed to understand the full picture. And me, What am I to you, really? He finally looked at me, and his eyes were red. At first, you were a way to prove to myself that I'd changed, that I could have a healthy relationship. Someone who looked like her, who reminded me of the good parts of her, but who I could do things right with this time. But then I actually got to know you, and I did fall in love with you. The real you. I couldn't let go of the idea that this was my redemption arc, my second chance. So you lied to me, I said. For months, you let me think I was special to you, when really I was just part of your self-improvement project. He flinched. It wasn't like that. Or maybe it was at first, but it changed. You have to believe me. I shook my head, backing away from him. I don't have to believe anything. You're not well, Daniel. You need help, professional help, and I can't be part of whatever this is. That's when his expression changed. The vulnerability disappeared, replaced by something harder. You're just like her, he said quietly. I bare my soul to you. I tell you my darkest secrets, and you judge me. You abandon me. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I'm not abandoning you. I'm protecting myself from someone who clearly hasn't dealt with his issues. He laughed, but it was bitter. Right, of course. I'm the villain in your story now. That's fine. But you should know something before you go. I waited, heart pounding. I know where you work, he said. I know your schedule. I know your routines. Not because I'm stalking you, I'm not, I swear. But because I paid attention, because I cared. And I just want you to think about that before you decide I'm some monster you need to run from. I know you, and you know me. We're connected now, whether you like it or not. I felt ice water flood through my veins. Are you threatening me? He held up his hands. No, God, no. I'm just saying, we can't just pretend this didn't happen. We can't just go back to being strangers. I won't let you erase me like Sarah did. And there it was. The real Daniel, the one who'd been lurking beneath the surface this whole time. The one who didn't take no for an answer. The one who saw love as ownership. I turned and walked away without another word, but I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. When I got home, I locked my door, closed all my curtains, and called Emma. I need you to come over right now, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. And I need you to help me figure out what to do, because I think I might be in trouble. Emma arrived 20 minutes later with her boyfriend Marcus, who worked as a lawyer. I told them everything, the photos, the restraining order, the conversation in the park. Marcus listened carefully, his expression getting more serious with every detail. When I finished, he said, "You need to document everything. Save every text, every voicemail, every interaction. If he escalates, you'll need evidence." The word escalates made my stomach drop. You think he will? Marcus exchanged a look with Emma. People with obsessive patterns don't usually just stop, especially when they feel rejected. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in my apartment made me jump. I kept checking my phone, half expecting threatening messages, but there was nothing. The silence was almost worse than contact would have been. It meant he was out there, thinking about me, planning his next move. I thought about filing a police report, but what would I even say? He hadn't technically threatened me. He just made it clear he knew things about me, which wasn't illegal. It was just terrifying. Next morning, I went to work like normal because I didn't know what else to do. My principal noticed I seemed off and asked if everything was okay. I said I was fine, just tired. How do you explain to your boss that your ex-boyfriend might be dangerous without sounding paranoid? I I taught my classes on autopilot, going through the motions while my mind raced. During lunch, I checked my email and found a message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line said, "You should know the truth." My hands shook as I opened it. It was from a woman named Rachel, and she said she'd seen my picture on Daniel's social media before he'd deleted his accounts. She said she needed to warn me about him. "I dated Daniel 2 years ago, right after Sarah," the email read. "I didn't know about her at first. He told me he'd had a bad breakup, but was ready to move on. After 3 months together, I started noticing strange things. He'd get angry if I changed my hair or wore different makeup. He wanted me to dress a certain way, listen to certain music. When I finally asked him about it, he admitted he'd chosen me because I reminded him of his ex. I felt sick reading it. This wasn't just about Sarah. This was a pattern." Rachel continued, "When I tried to break up with him, he showed up at my apartment for 3 weeks straight. He'd leave gifts. He'd wait outside my building. He sent me hundreds of texts telling me I didn't understand what we had, that I was making a mistake. I had to threaten legal action before he finally stopped. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know what you're dealing with. He's not just heartbroken. He's obsessive, and he doesn't understand boundaries. Please be careful." I forwarded the email to Marcus immediately and called Emma in tears. "There was another girl," I told her. "He did this before. I'm not the first replacement, I'm the second. Or maybe there were others." Emma's voice was tight with anger. "That's it. We're going to the police. This is a pattern of harassment." She left work early and met me at the police station. We filed a report, gave them copies of everything, the emails, screenshots of Daniel's texts, Rachel's warning. The officer who took our statement was kind, but honest. Without a direct threat, there's not much we can do right now. But having this on record is important. If he contacts you again, report it immediately. I left the station feeling helpless. The system couldn't protect me until something bad actually happened. I was supposed to just wait and hope he'd leave me alone. That night, I stayed at Emma's place. I didn't feel safe in my own apartment anymore. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. The message said, "I know you're scared of me now. I know you think I'm some kind of monster. But I'm not. I'm just someone who loves too much, who wants too much. I'm getting help. Real help this time. I just need you to know that everything I felt for you was real. Even if I showed it in the wrong way." I showed the text to Emma and Marcus. "Don't respond," Marcus said firmly. "Any engagement will encourage him." So I didn't. But the texts kept coming over the next few days. They weren't threatening, which somehow made them worse. They were sad, pleading, desperate. "I see you everywhere. I hear your voice in my head. How do I make that stop? And I drove past your school today. I didn't go in. I just wanted to feel close to you. And I'm sorry I'm like this. I wish I could be normal for you." After a week of messages, I finally responded, "Daniel, you need to stop contacting me. I've filed a police report. If you continue, I'll pursue a restraining order. Get help, but leave me out of it." For 2 days, there was silence. I started to hope that maybe he'd finally heard me. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, my principal called me into her office. "There's someone here to see you," she said, and her face was worried. "He says he's your boyfriend." I told him, "We don't allow visitors during school hours." But he's insisting it's urgent. My blood ran cold. "What does he look like?" I asked, even though I already knew. She described Daniel perfectly. "I'm calling the police," I said. "He's not my boyfriend. He's someone who's been harassing me." Her eyes went wide. "Stay in my office," she said. "I'll have security handle this." Through the window, I could see Daniel standing in the parking lot, looking up at the building. He was holding flowers, sunflowers again. He looked lost, broken, like a child who didn't understand why he was in trouble. Police arrived within 10 minutes. I watched from the window as they approached Daniel. At first, he seemed confused, then agitated. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I saw him gesture toward the building, toward where I was. One of the officers said something firm, and Daniel's shoulders slumped. They didn't arrest him. There wasn't legal cause, but they escorted him off school property and gave him a formal warning. One of the officers came inside to talk to me. "We've documented this incident. Combined with your previous report, you have enough for a restraining order if you want to pursue it." I did. That afternoon, Emma drove me to the courthouse, and I filed for a temporary restraining order. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, the order required Daniel to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought he'd finally realize he'd gone too far. But 2 days before the hearing, I received a package at Emma's apartment. He'd somehow found out I was staying there. Inside was a letter, pages and pages of handwritten rambling. He wrote about how we were meant to be together, how Sarah had been practice for me, how I was supposed to be his redemption. He wrote about the life he'd imagined for us, marriage, kids, growing old together. He wrote about how I'd betrayed that vision by refusing to understand him. And at the end, in shaky handwriting, he wrote, "If I can't have the life I planned, I don't want any life at all. This is your fault. You did this." I called the police immediately, terrified he was suicidal. They did a wellness check at his apartment, but he wasn't there. For 6 hours, I didn't know where he was or what he might do. Marcus stayed with me and Emma, all of us jumping at every sound. Finally, around 10 p.m., I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a hospital. Daniel had checked himself into psychiatric care. He'd told them he was having thoughts of hurting himself and needed help. The nurse calling me said he'd listed me as his emergency contact. But she was calling to inform me that he was safe and receiving treatment. I felt a confusing mix of relief and anger. Relief that he wasn't dead. Anger that even in his breakdown, he'd found a way to make me part of his story. The restraining order hearing happened while he was still hospitalized. The judge granted a permanent order based on the evidence, the pattern of behavior, Rachel's testimony via affidavit, the escalating contact, the appearance at my school. For 1 year, Daniel was legally required to stay away from me. If he violated it, he'd face criminal charges. 3 months have passed since then. I haven't heard from Daniel directly, but I know he was released from the hospital after a 3-week stay. Emma helped me move to a new apartment, one he doesn't know about. I changed my phone number. I made all my social media private. I'm in therapy now, working through the trauma of realizing the person I loved never actually existed. My therapist says what I experienced was a form of emotional abuse. He'd manipulated my feelings and my sense of reality to serve his own needs. Some days are harder than others. I still look over my shoulder when I'm walking alone. I still feel my heart race when I see someone who looks like him from behind. I have nightmares where he's standing outside my window, just watching. But I'm healing. Slowly, painfully, but surely. I've started dating again carefully, with clear boundaries and honest conversations. I tell people about Daniel now, not because I want pity, but because I want them to know what red flags look like. Rachel and I actually became friends. She reached out after the restraining order was granted, and we met for coffee. It helped to talk to someone who truly understood what it was like to be Daniel's obsession. She told me there was another girl before her too, someone named Ashley, who'd also looked like Sarah. A whole line of women he'd tried to mold into his lost love. We talked about reporting him to some kind of registry. But the sad truth is that emotional manipulation isn't illegal unless it crosses into stalking or threats. All we could do was warn others if his name came up. I think about Sarah sometimes, the original. I wonder if she knows what she escaped, if she understands the bullet she dodged by getting that restraining order. Part of me wants to reach out to her, to tell her that her instincts were right, that Daniel never got better like he claimed. But another part of me thinks she deserves to move on without being dragged back into his orbit. She made her escape. She doesn't need to know about the trail of destruction he left trying to recreate her. The hardest part is accepting that I'll never get real closure. I'll never hear Daniel take true accountability for what he did. In his mind, he's probably still the victim, the guy who loved too much, who tried so hard, who just wanted to be happy. He'll probably do this again with someone else, find another girl who reminds him of the one who got away. And there's nothing I can do to stop it, except hope she's smarter than I was, that she sees the signs sooner. But I'm not that girl anymore. The one who was so desperate to be loved that she ignored her instincts. The one who thought she could fix a broken man with patience and understanding. I know now that I was never his second chance. I was his revenge against a woman who had the strength to leave him. He wanted to prove he could make it work with someone like her. And when I turned out to be my own person with my own boundaries, he couldn't handle it. I was supposed to be his redemption, but I became his failure instead. Looking back, I can see all the moments I should have run. The too intense early relationship, the love bombing, the vague mentions of his ex, the weird comments from his friends, the way he'd get upset when I did things differently than he expected. But hindsight is cruel that way. It shows you all the exits you missed while you were busy believing in someone's potential. I don't blame myself anymore, though. That took time and therapy and a lot of tears. But I finally understand that his obsession was never about me. It was always about him and his inability to let go. I still have the necklace he gave me, the one that belonged to Sarah first. I keep it in a box in my closet, not because I want it, but because it's a reminder. A reminder that love should never make you feel like you're playing a role in someone else's story, that you should never have to compete with a ghost, that when someone says you're their second chance, you should ask them what they did to lose the first one. My students ask me sometimes why I don't have pictures of a boyfriend on my desk anymore. I tell them I'm focusing on myself right now, which is true. What I don't tell them is that I'm relearning how to trust my own judgment, how to hear alarm bells and actually listen, how to walk away from something that feels wrong even when it looks right on the surface. These are lessons I wish I'd known before Daniel, but maybe I had to learn them this way. Emma says I'm stronger now than I was before. Marcus says I'm a survivor. My therapist says I'm resilient. I don't know what I am yet. Some days I feel powerful, like I've conquered something dark and come out the other side. Other days I feel fragile, like one reminder of him could shatter me all over again. But I'm here. I'm alive. I'm free. And that's something he can never take away from me, no matter how many times he tried to rewrite my story into his. If there's anything I want people to take from this, it's this. You are not a second chance. You are not a do-over. You are not a replacement or a placeholder or a consolation prize. You are your own person with your own story, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve a page in your book. I wish I'd known that when I met Daniel at that gallery opening. I wish I'd seen the sadness in his eyes for what it really was, not depth, but obsession. But I know it now, and I'll never forget it again. The restraining order expires in 9 months. I don't know what happens after that. Maybe Daniel will have actually gotten help. Maybe he'll have moved on to someone new. Maybe he'll have forgotten about me entirely. Or maybe he'll be right back where he started, standing outside my window with flowers and apologies and thinly veiled threats. I don't know. What I do know is that I'll be ready. I have people who believe me. I have documentation. I have strength I didn't know I possessed. He said I was his second chance. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, is that he was mine too. My second chance to learn my worth. My second chance to choose myself. My second chance to understand that I deserve love that sees me, not love that tries to shape me into someone else's memory. And this time, I didn't waste it.